Still here with Sirius Talis Moon. We have Ascendant in Midheaven ruled by Mercury, Mercury at 6 degrees, Capricorn, and Jupiter in the 11th house. This is Jupiter hour. Moon day Jupiter is retrograde 20 degrees, Cancer, Moon 17 degrees, Leo. Now, I have been waiting out the Saturn hour in between videos, and beginning to learn about the Silver Dragon and the nakshatra where I have my ascendant, which is Bhadrapada, Purva Bhadrapada. Let's try to view this with traditional style and go to the, let's see if we have traditional style nakshatras. We might have Vedic nakshatras. So, yeah, this would put Saturn in Purva Bhadrapada. And yeah, this would put Saturn there with Neptune already going to Uttara Bhadrapada. So this is a nakshatra where the ruler of the triple Mars-Venus sign conjunction is, yes, it is somebody's Saturn return. Let me check it on the, yes, darlings. Can't get away! Can't get away! Angels in heaven gonna sign my name. And so Vulcan with planets in the, yes, last degrees of Pisces, tropical Pisces. And yeah, it's been a long long time where I've been seeing something, and I have Moon Square Aries, completely different. I have my ascendant in this nakshatra, but there's something that with the Moon Square Aries where I would have the intuition, and even I would say, well, it cannot be, but it was like, whoa. Well, it was. And I've had, this is why when I talk about this wars about sexual sovereignty, all the signs, all the omens lead to that, all the omens lead to that. Not necessarily going to look like that, but the many things that I say, and even I say to myself, well, this is too big of a revolution. Like the megalithic, then we had the Arab Spring, then we had the Me Too, then we had Safe October, then we have something going on with with something, and this is where learning about this, what M. Spiracy calls the Silver Dragon. Then somebody in the comments talked about this nakshatra. Again, last degrees of Pisces. A lot of you are having Sadasatis on this nakshatra, and that might be the Sadasati. Okay, Sadasati is Saturn conjunct Moon, not Saturn return. Sadasati is not Saturn return, but Saturn return on this nakshatra as well is, but the charts I'm speaking about is like, it's not the first time it's happening. Okay, so think about 28 years back. What was it that you couldn't get away with? I don't know the answer. I don't know. um, Erinnerung. Missing. Something missing. The Chiron there is also. But wait a second. Wait a second. Decentralizing. Decentralizing Secretary Generals. Um, so, yeah. When it comes to the placements in this nakshatra, and I know moon in this nakshatra, I know my ascendant in this nakshatra, Saturn's, Chiron's, Sun, not the toddler. um, and yeah, this is where, if I take it by um, Johnny Patry, Vedic astrologer, then to summarize, and you can watch the original video, but to summarize what she says, that's the can't get away with anything nakshatra. And this is where, now, if you think about tropically, it's the last decan of Pisces. The last decan is the closure before the head of the baby. It's the closure where, if Pisces is kind of like the collective karma, in the sense of we've accumulated 12 signs and this is the end of it. It's the end of the cycle. So this is why we have it's still a Piscean nakshatra, which means the duality effect of that. And people with placements in that nakshatra can often be in a situation where, because it's still the Pisces, it's still the ocean, so it's kind of like they can be in a conversation and somebody says, okay, you're going to do this and that, and they're like completely believing that they're going to do this and that, and they go with the current, and the current is like, well, but the right thing to do is now different. And that is why this can be very unpredictable. Think about if Aries is the head of the baby and Pisces is the water breaks into the preconception, which is the transition between Pisces and Aries. And think about labor and how many people say a lot of things about labor. My parents thought they would have me in a forest. And it was the closest, but it was still in a hospital. Or people say, I want only epidural, then either epidural is missing, or by the time that they get the epidural, the baby's out, and or people say, I want natural birth, a water birth, but then they actually need to have a C-section or something that's actually genuinely, authentically needed. Um, and this is exactly and this is exactly something that can be connected with going from the water of preconception to actual the physical head of the baby, which is where we need to apply what's actually needed according to the current situation that is going from the piece maybe of the water of preconception to the water breaks emergency. It's newborn. And, the emergency life. And so I was shown different variations of birth as well with Saturn and Neptune going through this nakshatra, because whether, for example, the head of the baby is being pulled, and that can be that someone is being pulled out, they don't go out, they're being pulled out, and how people can be even all well into their 60s going into their own birth experience and pondering or wondering about the experience of the technology that was used to birth them. I know talk about the clone Aries and the cloning project. And a lot of people, you know, particularly since before COVID, is this topic of fertility, whether people are going to have babies or not, is coming up a lot. So people begin to think about their own births, and for some people, it might even occupy them every now and then, quite some. Um, and this is a time where, let's say, Saturn going through this nakshatra is showing us of implications. Now, Saturn is ruling the Venus Mars Sun, and this is where, as I was listening to Conspiracy, and then I was like, okay, I got to see this nakshatra, and I'm like, okay, I have the ascendant in this nakshatra, but there are also a lot of placements that I know around this nakshatra, very pivotal people in my life, and indeed, this nakshatra has to do with uh, world success and world degrees. Oh, this would go if Saturn is right now at 27 degrees Pisces, 26 degrees Pisces. This would go, so it would be 25, 24, 23, 22, 20. I think it would also include the 18th degree. That would be somebody's midheaven. Because I was like, why is Peter coming? Why is Peter coming to the energy? And I'm like, oh, because that was also. The living and the dead. Will the people that have nothing in this nakshatra stay silent for a while? Oh my god, no, that's Chiron. That's Chiron. Is it Chiron? I don't, never mind. So, um, yeah. It's they can't get away with anything if and because it's Pisces, then it's like even death doesn't save. Saturn is death, so even death doesn't save a person from that being addressed. And so, okay, like and that's just something that I'm like, wow. I was um, because it does denote of worldly success, um, with everything that arises with that. So, and yet, if I talk about, I talk about secret societies or the elite, and I talk about the getting away with, because they are taught, they're basically tortured too, and only the survivors of this torture, the ones that are not expandable children, and only the survivors of this torture, they learn that that they can get away with everything, but they have to do those everything that they can get away with. And it's so much so that the torture that's causing them to become alive, many of them during the doing what they need to do, which is crimes against humanity. Okay, and basically, um, they on the precipice that they would get away with that, and it becomes almost the authentic nature to the nature. If one asks, I was saying, but I wanted that, and so and where I know what was done to the children, I'm like, well, but and even when they look at the nature of nature, that their own inner psychology, that am I the iceberg? I'm not Greenland. Oh my God. I'm not cold. I'm not cold. I'm just saying that they were taught that they can get away with that. And by design, the structures of these cults is setting them up to set themselves up while thinking that, first of all, that this is their nature to desire to harm. And then by having them believing that they can get away with doing what they see as natural, which is not, and then setting them up that they can't get away with that, even after death. This is one of the tragedies of this nakshatra for the people that were born within those societies. And this is and this is why it has some of the harshest life lessons, because it's not an nakshatra that people can get away with. And I have ascendant here. For me, I was growing outside of these societies, so there wasn't much I was trying to get away with. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, and not only that, I have Mercury Aries, so I don't like lying. So there was not much that. But when I ran into the elite, then it was so immediately obvious to me that something happens there that's like the Holocaust, that they force people to be perpetrators. And even, ran into whether it's psychologist or whatnot, and even people say, but this is my nature. I was like, no, it's not. And I intuitively knew that. And I didn't know about the rituals and the tortures and the way that they would switch pain and pleasure so that they would feel like they come alive when they're being cruel to people, and they believe that this is their nature. Even if they're like looking introspectively into um, not everyone, because people can identify the glitches in the matrix, you know, and it doesn't mean that people cannot, because there can be several compartments of the personality, and here there can be a duality where people can enjoy the joys of life and also have the side that comes alive with those type of cruelties. In fact, one of the trauma responses is laughter at sad parts, and so this is So, and this is where just exactly the people that would have the worldly success would be grown into believing that they can get away with everything, and then seeing that not coming to fruition. They don't really get away with what they were taught that they would get away with. Now, growing outside of like a secret society or something like that, the most I'll have to get away with, I don't know, it would when I was a young child, I really liked a certain snack, and then I grabbed that snack. I did not have enough money to pay, and then the next day I came and I had the money and I put it next to the cashier. That's the most I had like to get away with. But people that grew inside those societies, there was no getting away with not doing the things that they were taught that they would get away with as long as they do them. And they had to show that they really want to so it's Pisces, so it's not without grace. And um, um, Johnny Patry mentions this as people can really learn their lesson in the sense that they can wise up. Now, when I think about this nakshatra being basically the last nakshatra before the nakshatra that transmutes us into Aries, yes, 27 is really on the brink of those nakshatras. It's like, can get away or cannot get away. Darling, go 28 years back. Um, 28 years back. It's gonna tell you pretty much. But 28 years back, that would be, yes, we're 2026 now. That would be 1998, 7, 6. um, and here now, oh my gosh, this is really interesting because for this particular case, that particular era was the era that they were doing rituals to supposedly show that you can get away. Okay, there was the White March, and then there were things. There was ritual abuse happening during the White March that was against ritual abuse, and I don't know if somebody participated or didn't participate, but if it was basically done to kind of show that here we can do that even when all these people march and so on and so forth. Um, but that would be to reinstall the by design thingy. And in a very convoluted way, it was also the not being able to get away with being a perpetrator. Oh, how should I say that? Okay. It's kind of like if somebody doesn't come out as survivor. I'm talking about the Saturn. For okay, I'm not talking about children here. I'm talking about the perpetrator in that case, who was of age. So they was supposed to have been coming to their 30s. Okay, 28. And if they were taking part in that, then that was to create a situation that they would feel like this is their Saturn return and oh, they can get away with that. Here is the White March and so on and so forth. Um, but it's also kind of, hey, if one did not come out as a survivor, because at that time it was the Trudeauseers, and if somebody did not come out as a survivor or did not like get out of the cult, they had to participate in being a perpetrator again. And in that, I think in that ritual, they were also being victims. Either they were either the victims were forced to watch the video of, or that they were being victims. Um, and so, yeah, very challenging. I mean, um, so yes, that is, yeah. Um, Again, this topic is very intricate, but when we're talking about extortion cults and the things that are associated with that worldly success, drug trafficking, which is basically also sex trafficking of children and adults, um, Epstein Island, Oak, yes, um, and there were even some people that maybe believed that they could save the family, and then they really like to make people believe that if they would do that, they would save their family, and then they don't. And this is something that um, they don't. That's the point. They don't. Okay. And not with the, if there's anything on this nakshatra, it means they don't. And this is where this is also where these people can be confronted with situations where the choice Jupiter that's presented is not really choice, in the sense of, okay, let's say somebody say, oh, if you will shut up, it will be okay, but it will be okay when there is no rape in spirit and in matter, not any sort of, because Anyway, going with that is going into the things that they said that one would get away with by going with. And the threats that they would threaten if somebody speaks, for people with this nakshatra, okay, I'm not prescribing to everybody to speak at all times. Definitely not if you're not ready for it, and so on and so forth. But this one is really it's a life or death issue about the truth, and one would have to be truthful to their, because they can't get away with choosing to avoid the truth. And I've been trying to tell that to the living people, because even if I think about this example of the White March, the people that were perpetrators there, first of all, it was a new case and they had to be filmed, naturally. Um, I'm going to have to check some CVs to date back to. Um, and secondly, we're going to talk about water and water poisoning, because I have a feeling that there would be a city where the water would be poisoned in the coming week. Um, Again, and you know what, I'll talk about this right now. No, wait a second. In that example of going 28 years back and so on and so forth, then they were also victims of ritual abuse and perpetrators of young boy, basically as adults, as people of Saturn return, perpetrators towards young boys, which means that they were not just legally eligible, but they were 28 or 26 or 27, like, and this is, and I see that it's a tendency, the cult likes to do that. I also met a case where a person was coming to the Saturn return and he had to harm me. And whatever he thought he was saving by that, he wasn't. Um, and so, and I was just thinking, because I've been horrifically tortured, and I escaped, and I was just thinking, oh my God, this person's going through their Saturn return. They have 28 years from now, but I really, really hope that they will not stay with that implication, because it's terrible. Like, I was thinking about them and what, not because I was not thinking about me or anything like that, but because I knew that they were tortured in some way to torture me, and I was like, oh my God, this is something that's going to really affect their life very, very dramatically, very, very malefically. Um, and then they would get, they would finish their PhD and would get a stable position in the academia. And and while I did not agree to do those things, and therefore took a break from academia, and then I was not even allowed to follow my, because I made a certification, I was not allowed to practice because I was not doing these torture rituals. And basically, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and so on. So at first, the person is trafficked, but then everybody wants to get away from being trafficked, so they become trafficker. And this is where um, if I think about the Saturn case with this nakshatra, then this is where those things come to the surface. And here it's like, when normally when people say, "Oh, karma or life lessons," like, no, this one is like, this one is like Holocaust levels of difficult. Like it is really overwhelming. For example, when I started to tend to political assassination prevention, um, following a case where I was like, I was running from my life, I was just escaping basically, and running into case of assassination of a journalist, knowing nothing about nothing, and I was like, well, the police did that, and I was trying to channel people, and the first thing I got was this country is North Korea. It was coming up again in the coming days. It's like he really wanted to, and so this is something that was kind of like a domino fall of series of events that had to do with the transits that I was going through at the time. Falcon, this is this nakshatra. Okay, it's not the ghetto. And here is the thing. Something in me knew that something will be discovered. I had no idea to what extent. And then I would see things that wouldn't be, you know, what is happening, what is going on, what's this and then that and then, but how does that make sense with that, and so on and so forth. And one thing led to another. um, and then I was exposed to the extortion cults, basically. It's the secret societies. um, Now, having, for example, Rahu or Ketu in this nakshatra, Ketu might mean purging. Okay, so it can even mean that one is purging worldly success, but then the other is Rahu in Al Qaid. So Al Qaid is also quite protective and important. Um, and I was a Jupiter Al Qaid for Peter. And and so um, and it was an ordered assassination by Peter, like for Peter, not by Peter, that it was basically assassination as a snuff. And um, in those societies, people also sometimes try to push the karma onto other people, which also can really backfire. I'm not an energy reader in that sense, but I definitely received. I saw the faces of energy readers reading for the times where such a thing backfired, and they were not having pretty faces. Like that was that was bad. That is, and so um, um, Nederland's 1800 chart has a pretty stellium around that, which means that Nederlands can't get away with anything. I'm not going to do the charts of the royalty now. Um, it's a can't get away with chart. And this is so. Now, what is the tragedy here is that the amount of torture that goes into raising people in the notion that their nature is delight in and cruelty, and that they only come alive through that, unless they have another public persona programmed where they have to be empathic and so on and so forth. Um, but and then making them believe that they can get away with doing that, what is supposedly in their nature, and that there is no good or bad, and so on and so forth, and then setting them up to, hey, that world was really not real. There actually is karma. Actually, the nature is not cruelty. That's trauma. It was by design. And everybody that tried to talk about that was silenced in some gruesome ways. Michael Francesa had just this video about. I don't have chart of Michael Francesa. I think I did. I don't remember. Anyway, um, talked about. He begged the questions: how many people have to die before we get the true answer about Epstein? Now we have to talk about the handlers of handlers and the mind control and so on and so forth. I don't know how deep does he get into that in the video. Um, But I did talk about the fact that people got to mafia because they were excluded from trade, and then they became mafia, and then there was gladios, so they became informants, and informants probably have to do things worse than even in the mafia. That's why they became informants, because they needed somebody to do that. And then the oats culture. And I was talking about the context of Standard Oil in making, let's say, alcohol, lineage that's produced, let's say, alcohol or wine or whiskey or a brandy or vodka, and instead of that being used for tinctures, then that being used to alter the consciousness, put some drug in it, and traffic someone, basically. Um, and it had to be filmed. And that was going for the that's actually sorry. So but they would be threatened with death, and quite a gruesome one, if they speak. And so this is where, and that would put all of them in this conglomerate of everybody is bound to silence that nobody can keep. And so they would rejuvenate the elite and make us think that this is justice. This is a justice show, when everything was set up from the get-go And now when we talk about child traffickers, human traffickers, and torture and stuff like that, that kind of looks monstrous. But if we talk about how do we prevent the creation of a monster, then it has to do with the clothing project. um, then this is where in this nakshatra we see how should I say that? Even those that were made to believe that they can get away with evil don't. Okay, if I think about that, that the 28 years and somebody growing into society where it's like to get away with, so you get to be the head of this company and then that company, and that's just the things that are written in the CV, and 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 then comes to the Trudeauseers, and then there is actually a ritual of raping children while the white marching, and but in that ritual, the 28 years olds are also raped, and then they have to rape again, and that's of course has to be filmed, and then they get to the next level, where it's politics or armée or whatnot, and so on and so forth. And how this is where the just in the place where first of all, just in a place where somebody thought that they could get away with, and then the Trudeauseers happened, then you have to silence everything. But then they also do that thing again, and the people that do that are also ritually abused. And they reinforce this silence through these means. It's basically a part of how Michel Nihul could have silenced everything around Marc Dutroux and keep it and keep a fence around Marc Dutroux, saying, okay, that fire doesn't spread anymore from here, but it was done with torturing the 28 years olds and the older people and have them rape children. So now they have new tapes on them and they could be extorted to make it a Marc Dutroux case and not a global petering case. And then people like Anneke Lucas have falling apart of trauma, is I hope that's not there's a moon there. Dat weet ik niet. Anyway, moon is also emotions, by the way. And that is particularly if somebody does with the emotions. How should I say that? Oh, this is one not good position to be doing emotional type of. um, with Moon here, one doesn't, how should I say it, if somebody is sent to, let's say, emotionally, to use the emotions as a bait towards someone, they might actually develop emotions. Okay, this and yeah, more things to do with that. Rao Ketu again. Ketu is purging that position, so they can be, if there are, if let's say somebody's born into worldly success, they might be fatally letting go of that, or they have, or it can be something that they came from, but they're not necessarily attached to, and that can be maybe even a great position to have. Um, Rahu, on the other hand, means that they are fated to worldly success and they can't get away with doing extortion calls, which is one megalittically challenging position for the time being. It means that when they are doing those things, they are fated to materialize sometimes both the participation in extortion calls and then not being able to get away with at the same time. Sun here can have to do with the world leader. Um, and again, this is person that won't be able to get away with going with, for example, one of the witnesses that when I tended to ritual satanic abuse, basically I tended to political assassination prevention, and I was like, okay, how do I prevent? Well, I have to abolish any type of this children-related stuff. And I was being pragmatic. It's like, what can one do to basically prevent that? So it's the interest of the politicians not to be extorted. And so I said what I said. Logic, right? Um, and so I said it's not their interest to be extorted. And so I began to tend to basically prevention of extortion calls, which would go all the way to the oil and gas and water. Remind me to talk about, okay, poisoning the water, because what happens in these rituals, basically, if somebody is shown emotions, water, rape deprives people of water, which means that if somebody is told they will only get water if they agree to be raped, they will poison the water of everyone, even if it means they're dead, because I even ran into cases where people were molested or so on and so forth, and they couldn't even so much as drink water, even though there was water. So, now that I mentioned what I wanted to talk about, the fact that Saturn is in Pisces, which is oceans, and the moon, which is ruling over Jupiter, which is ruling over Saturn, it's going to be in Al Qaid in 2 days, and this is cities, water infrastructure, Venus, Sun, Mars coming to the 18th degree is poisoning water infrastructure. It can also be the poisons or the chronic toxins around the old water infrastructure or the underwater infrastructure, because it's Pluto, and it's the under of cities Now, what's done in those under of cities rituals, which means that, and this is where there can be a delay in diagnosing or notifying the population. Is 12th house from Israel. And it might not necessarily be planned, which is important. It can be a leak. With Saturn and Neptune, it can be a leak. But those that thought, and I kept a couple of, how many times I said, those that think that they can restrict the waters of others. So this means that the water is going to be polluted by those that have restricted the water of others. Now, Israel is, of course, the immediate suspect. And it can be hospitals in Israel, that can be jails in Israel, but cities that are associated with that. For example, I live in city's hospital. They say, oh, store water. I don't know. Oh, Falcon. I mean, I can store enough water to be. We're also not legally allowed to store water. But um, but I'm thinking more about the corporations of the water. The corporations of the water are going to have their infrastructures polluted, particularly the corporations that are in the cities. And it's going to be something that's going to cause some viral disease. Look, I said that January 6th is looking funny, and what did we have in Christmas with this triple conjunction? The churches go ablaze. And in entire Netherlands, it was not just Amsterdam or Breda, what was it? Yeah. So and so this is also where yes, with Sun in this nakshatra means person is disdain to worldly success and disdain to not being able to get away with the vices that that entails, and I mean extortion calls. And when I listened to the testimony of one of the survivors, then he was tortured in hospital and he was needing a home, and the name that he mentioned had to do with one of the cases that I was tending to in the political assassination prevention. And so I was trying to bridge in the gap and publish his post so that he will get funding for a home without stepping on the toes of the politician that had to be both perpetrator and victim. And then I had to remind the person that testified that in those rituals, people have to be both perpetrators and victims. And that stirred up something, but that was to try to mitigate what was happening to him in hospital. And I knew, and they were from the same city, so they were from the same town. So I knew that when it comes to political assassination, they